Hey guys, we're back again with another video here at Total Chaos 2019, and we're really excited to sit with Paul Nicholls from Factory 15. I think it would be great if you could give us like a little background. I think a lot of people know you, but it would be good to hear a little bit about, maybe where you came from, where you studied.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm Paul Nicholls. I'm one of the founders and creative directors at Factory 15, and my background is in architecture, as most people from our industry is. I studied art at Coventry University. I did my BA in architecture at Oxford Brookes University. I studied for a couple of years as an architect in London, trained myself in kind of visualization and was doing that along the side to earn money for my masters. Did my masters at UCL Bartlett, where I met my two kind of co-founding partners of Factory 15, and we specialise in architecture and fiction, architecture and film. That's how we kind of started making animations and films and that kind of stuff. And we basically graduated our 2-year masters, and some of our graduation films went viral on the internet, and that's how we started Factory 15 with those projects as our kind of main portfolio. So we've always had that two branches to our work: the kind of architectural visualization and the more kind of narrative film. And been doing lots of kind of short films, and over the years, like Jonah and other things like that, and more recently Robot and Scarecrow and Anna and lots of other projects. And we've slowly been doing more advertising for kind of brands. We're signed to Nexus Productions for advertising content and that kind of thing. We do like music videos and all sorts of things like that. We've started getting more into immersive media more recently, but all with a kind of architectural foundation. Architecture is at the heart of what we do, from design to visualization to the directorial work we do. And slowly the kind of visualization and the film work and more narrative-based film work has been merging more recently with bigger architectural film jobs coming along and that kind of thing. So.
Right. And who are the other two guys?
Jonathan Gales and Kibwe Tavares are the other two founders.
Yeah.
And then we've got Matt Townsend, who's another one of our directors as well.
Okay, we just want to give you guys a shout out,
Well, if we can do that, then we've got Benedita Bogozzi,
yeah, exactly.
we've got Aris, we've got Tom, we've got Lauren, our producer, we've got Will, our office manager. Who else is there? We've got Nicholls from finance. Yeah, we've got the whole team, and then all of our regular freelancers that we use. We're a very small team, but we kind of expand to quite a big team with a very regular kind of core family of freelancers that we use. So.
Yeah, so we did already an interview with Benedetto earlier about sort of the specific project for Nissan. And today you talked about pitching projects, and it's a great topic because it's one of those things that you don't hear a lot about. When people come to conferences, they talk about their work generally, and you framed it in the context of the work, so like what the process was to get there. But real quick before we talk about that, you mentioned you come from doing ArcViz, and there's still like this really strong aspect of that in the work. It seems a lot of the projects you guys do, there's a lot of environment, a lot of architecture inside.
Yeah.
And so that's like a specialty that you guys can bring, right?
Yeah, it just all comes back to our education in architecture and the scale of which we were building our stories in our kind of masters. We've always coined this kind of world building term, which is kind of a few people at the conference have been speaking about. But we like to create characters within the kind of films that we create, and architecture is a big part of that, a big character for us in a lot of the films. Like Jonah, you think about Jonah with the kind of transforming city, that was a huge metaphor for kind of social change through tourism of the project, and there's lots of other projects that have a similar kind of approach. But so the whole design and world building of all of our projects is super important, and it goes with this. From a kind of production pipeline, the work we do with architects is no different. It's just one has slightly more narrative and kind of design to it, and one is more kind of visualization technique. But yeah. Okay.
But like to get back into the thing about pitching, which is quite interesting. You were talking about today how sometimes you put a list of there's about 5 players, right? From the client, what was it? Client.
Yeah. So. It was more to kind of show the hierarchy of different projects, and specifically within kind of branded content, which we were learning as we started this whole process. We kind of got signed to an agency from the beginning, and we kind of slowly understood the kind of how these roles work. I mean, for a traditional kind of visualization studio, most of the work is direct to client, whether that be an architect or a developer. So that architecture studio, the visualization studio, will act as the kind of one-stop shop for most of the work that they would do. But with advertising, it's a bit different. You have the main client, you have and that client will contact an agency. That agency will then contact different production studios to then pick a director to then pitch for the job. That director will then work with a 3D studio to kind of deliver the work. So there is a bit more of a hierarchy to the process, and that comes from history of advertising. That's how it's always been, and slowly people are breaking out of that mold a little bit more, and we're one of them. So we do work directly to clients on certain projects, especially obviously the architectural projects, but sometimes with the brand we'll also work directly. Sometimes we'll go through our agents, Nexus Productions, and they've been really good to us. But there is that kind of structure. So there's quite a filtering process to even be selected as a director. But that's what I was kind of mentioning that in my talk, that that's why we're a little bit different. We're not just a 3D studio, we're a directing collective. And so as a directing collective, we work with a production studio sometimes, to work on these jobs, and then we have the benefit of being able to bring in our production facility, our own studio, to do some of the work. And sometimes we collaborate, like I said in my talk, with other CG studios as well. We're kind of open to that all the time. Sometimes because the project is too big for us, we're only a small team, or because there's more expertise, or sharing the load, or lots of different reasons. But most of the time we're at least the director and the CG studio, and sometimes we're the producers and the director client agency as well.
And is there like a preferred method that you like to work in? I mean, because you said that in the talk, you said that like the producers, sometimes they're like handling the client relationship, and then the creative part is then from the director and down, I guess is how it would work. Is there like a way that you like to work?
Different advantages to both. I mean, obviously you get way more control with the kind of director-client relationship. It's a bit of a smoother, linear process. But sometimes, especially on the kind of bigger branded stuff where the client will expect that kind of pipeline, that kind of filter of both information and also stress is sometimes welcome to kind of be shared through that kind of filtering process of the producer and the agency. So kind of like, because essentially we're all on the same team, we want to do good for the client, and the better we work as a team, the happier the client's gonna be. But so they have advantages and disadvantages to working direct to client or we're through an agency and production studio.
But it seems like if you are, of course, when you're working direct with client, there are things you have to take care of that you maybe you have many more things to handle.
Yeah, one of the biggest one being a shoot. If the shoot's involved, if we work with Nexus, then they're going to handle the shoot, and if we work direct to client, then we're kind of producing that shoot as well. That's normally a huge component to any kind of ambitious film with post-production is the kind of handling whatever shoot there might be.
It's a lot of organizational stuff.
And we have our own production in-house. We have a producer and then help us with that. Shout out to Lauren. I don't know if I made
you did. You said
but yeah. So we are doing that as well. But of course we bring in freelancers and help for some of the larger productions, and we work with Nexus on certain jobs as well. But yeah.
Okay. There was one thing that I noticed that you didn't really say anything about during the talk was, because in the pitch process, that usually means that you're not the only one that's pitching something for the client.
Yeah.
And you didn't really say anything about that, but in those projects that you showed, were there a lot of other people who are pitching as well?
Yeah, I mean, so the presentation I went through 5 different projects and the kind of pitch phase of those 5 different projects. How we convince the client to choose us to make their project or to bring their vision to life, or to design what they wanted to show. And I chose 5 projects that were very different in the pitching phase, and some that were kind of like were a lot more design involved. Some of them were a lot more kind of narrative or script based, like a huge variety of different things. And then I showed the kind of final result of that to show how the pitch phase really informed and the final result of that pitch was very similar to what we kind of presented to the client. But we're always pitching against other people. If you think about it, if you've got a client, if they're picking an agency, they'll pick one agency, but then that agency will pick maybe 3 production studios. And then each production studio has to pick you as one of their directors, and they might have 10, 20 directors on their roster. So there's already like a 1 in however many chance of getting that job. And then you're pitching with the production studio against 3 other production studios with each of their own directors, and then the client the agency normally pick their favorite option, and they'll present all 3 or 4 to the client, and they'll kind of have a bias towards one particular direction that they might prefer the most. But ultimately be the client that makes the final decision. So Yes, I mean, again, it depends on whether we're direct to client or working through an agency, but we're always competing against other people.
Right.
So
and what do you feel? What's your ratio? Are you having to pitch really a lot to get a few projects, or are you
we
sure?
We tend to win everything. No. No.
So right, that's what I wanted to hear.
No. Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes it's weird. You never really know your kind of hit rate. I mean, it changes from year to year. We had a really successful year a couple of years ago. We were kind of almost winning most of the pitches we were doing, and then a few pitches that you do, you might or you're really confident with, and then you don't win. And sometimes it's like one of the projects I showed. We were kind of pitching on it in November, and then we thought it went away, and then it came back in March, and it got green lit, and then all of a sudden we had a very small amount of time to create it. So yeah, it really depends. You can often, I always think I can go with my gut. When you hand in a strong pitch, you kind of know if you've got it or not, and it will normally be a kind of I'll normally be pretty confident when we're not going to get it, but I'll also be confident when I feel like we've handed in a good pitch and we've got a good chance, and then it'll be just down to so many external factors with whether that kind of goes ahead or not.
Yeah. So during the pitching phase, this seems like, because I saw what you put up there on the screen, that it actually is an involved process, and you actually have to create a little bit of work there behind it. And like, how much work is this generally to create the pitch?
Yeah, I think the 5 projects I've shown have such varied amounts of work within them, and that's what I'm saying. I really wanted to show the work that goes into this, kind of, because it's an unspoken story. I mean, I was presenting within the art track, and it's really about the art of pitching. And sometimes you can communicate a pitch very quickly using kind of references and descriptions, but sometimes you actually need to produce work for it, like design, get into 3D, show them something. Even storyboarding, you might actually invest in storyboarding something properly if you feel like you need to visualize it in a very specific way. But it varies massively. So some projects are paid pitches, very rarely, but 10% maybe will be a kind of paid pitch where you'll be given a certain amount of money, which will at the very most cover your costs of producing the pitch, and that might be kind of 2 weeks of work, say, to kind of produce something. It's a paid pitch, then normally you have to make something like they want to see what it looks like. So you have to visualize something. So you're actually getting in 3D and testing something, or you're doing some, going out and filming something, very roughly to give the client an idea. One project I showed, we actually did the initial pitching phase was to create a bunch of concept art. So we did that. That was a paid pitch, and then as a result of that, we were successful in getting the film. Other projects, it's more of a written treatment, and it'll be like a week-long pitch, and we'll put together like an InDesign document of however many pages to kind of illustrate the idea in written, as well as through references and maybe some quick artwork that we throw together. So it really depends, but normally it can vary between a week and 2 weeks is more standard. But if there's iterations, and if we get a kind of inclination that the client wants to choose our idea, then we'll maybe put a bit more effort in to kind of get it over the line. A couple of weeks more work potentially, but it's normally me and John and Kibwe that do most of the directing on the advertising and film stuff, and then Matt obviously some more on the kind of architectural projects, but and then we might get like 1 or 2 of the artists in the studio to kind of help out and produce something if we're feeling good about it.
And that's because it actually sounds a little bit like the architectural competition process. Sometimes a lot of it is you don't get anything. You just do it, and other times you're invited and you get a little bit of money, only covering costs, maybe even possibly costs, maybe not. Yeah. So I have one more question for you to wrap up, and that would be that what's some like information you could pass along to people about the important things you should do during the pitch process.
Yeah, it's hard to say one thing, but there was a few things I mentioned in my talk, which were often you get given these huge briefs, whether it's by an agency or an architect or direct to client. And one thing I always like to do is kind of distill all that information and represent that back to the client. And it really shows the client that you've understood the core components of the brief, and it feels like you're kind of re-showing the client their own work. but it's actually showing them you understand the brief, you understand the important parts of the project, and you really get it. So that's always how we kind of start off a lot of these pitches is this is what the project's about from how we see it, and then very simply communicating the singular idea back to them on the next page. You know, this is our vision, this is the project, this is the vision, and then you can go into detail. The temptation is to go into detail too soon or talk about things that are not relevant, but you need to communicate what the project is and what your key concept is or your idea, one kind of liner, one paragraph, one image, and then go into detail through all the other bits. So
seems like a good idea.
Yeah, and it depends what information you get from people, because obviously architects are terrible at distilling information and they just give you these huge documents, whereas agencies are very good because that's their job and they kind of distill a brief back down. But then I think people, especially a lot of the kind of branded agencies we work with, people like to hear their own idea presented back to them. I think that's kind of something I've learned over the years, at least anyway.
Okay, so thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. We're going to look forward to see this on the channel. Thanks.
Yep, cheers.
So thank you guys for watching. There's going to be some more videos from Total Chaos 2019. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video, share it with your friends, and we'll see you for the next one.
Let's go to make it in there.
Yeah, oh, definitely.